Questions?
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think so, not that we know of, and, any, according to our finance policy too, anything that's donated to us. Control over how we notice it, or how we take session, so, not that we would dispose of our. Good question. And that spirit of like just considering where the art came from too, was a part of a lot of our discussion, we're trying to assess. Now, what should we aim on to, just because it's those. Or.
And all of these were presented at least at one time.
All of these were displayed, yeah,
Uh-huh.
all of these were up, especially pre-renovation. Some of these. Were displayed in staff areas, some of them on the second floor here.
Mhm.
So
Other questions or comments? Okay, let's move on to disbursement report, pages 9 through 19. Any questions? Richard, anything?
I think so, pretty standard, so.
Yep. Any more questions? Can I have a motion to approve the disbursement report?
I'll second you.
We have to vote individually because it's Mary?
Yes.
Amanda?
Yeah.
Michelle?
Yes.
Sheldon?
Yes.
Ellen? And that makes it unanimous. It's approved. On to page 20, approval of the Petty Auditorium construction pay app. At a total cost of $60,072.40 for this particular pay app. If there's no question, can I have a motion to approve Petty Auditorium construction pay app number 1 at a total cost of $60,072.40? Mary?
Yes.
Amanda? Michelle?
Yes.
Sheldon?
Yes.
Ella? Yeah. Amy as well, so that passes unanimously as well. On to the consent agenda, pages 23 through 37. First day of the-
Oh, sorry,
Sure, go ahead.
we have the, second.
Oh. Okay, the architect one?
This is for the AV contract. There's in this project, there will be a construction payout, but for like. Construction. work.
Oh, I see. Sorry, page 22, my fault.
Okay.
For the AV pay app, this one is $9,312.41. No questions, can I get a motion to approve that? Okay, Mary,
Yes.
Amanda, Michelle,
Yes.
Shabna,
Yes.
Ellen? Yeah. Yes, as well, so that passes unanimous as well, sorry.
Thank you. And we'll have continued to have to.
They're hoping to finish next month.
Yeah, so hopefully it'll be wrapped up done in October. Maybe November, there's always something to continue, yeah. You know, as you said.
Yeah. You said country.
Yep.
Now on to consent agenda 23 through 37.
Add a comment, like, I don't think I necessarily need to see it every month, but maybe on a quarterly basis or something, still kind of seeing how we're comping to pre-COVID numbers. I mean, I know it's been several years, but it's, I know we were on such a high for that, so I would just like to see maybe on a quarterly basis, just the progress against that.
It's solely, yeah, doable, and we have a dashboard as well, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know we keep moving the needle upwards and it'll just be interesting to kind of track that, like, again, not every month, but maybe just quarterly. Or
And in the data highlights. Which one, there's a significant jump or something. That is a no. Yeah, hold on.
Would it help to add on the fiscal year 2020 to the service stats?
It's a lot of data on one page, that's why I'm like, I don't know if I necessarily need to see it every time, but it could just be like a high level snapshot every quarter, just how we're coming to pre-COVID or
Okay.
something like that.
Okay, maybe we can include some comments too.
Just for context.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing from one is like not just to COVID, but like or.
Yeah, like right
See
before,
what we're-
like at our peak, basically, before.
So fiscal year 2019. Yeah, okay, yeah, that's not a problem.
Same thing, page 27, I put that overall our year-to-date is up. But July was down pretty much across the board. Any idea what was different this July? Most months, we rarely get it where everything's down.
Yeah, we tried to brainstorm on this. We're not entirely sure. There was one fewer week of booking with the buddy this summer, which may have impacted youth serve, but there wasn't really anything we could point our finger at that, you know, might have indicated lower numbers, so.
If it continues to trend that way.
Right, yeah, I know that, in that word,
Yeah,
Olympics and whatever else.
Yeah,
yeah, maybe.
and
people
it's been
just-
gorgeous weather. Yeah.
And the numbers for most of these in terms of the declining is very small in the sheer number, but the percentage is.
Right, and the year-to-date is up. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not
Yeah.
concerned, it's just unusual.
No, yeah, the color is really. In terms of,
Just seeing that numbers were down.
yeah, for attendees,
Yeah.
not entirely sure.
Well, a piece of that is how we structure the teen volunteer program year to year. It changes from year to year what proportion of the teen volunteer opportunities are teens, and something that we're counting based on the Illinois Public Library report as a program versus just coming in for a shift of doing like volunteer work. So the teens in the summer reading t-shirt prize pickup right now, that doesn't get reported in programming stats. So that's a significant component of it, of how the teen volunteering, compares.
I just wanted to call out a stat on that same page that I thought was really interesting. I thought it was interesting that the number of public events was down, but the overall attendees was actually significantly up. So I think that that's a very positive thing. I think it shows the productivity of the events that we're doing, like, and I think overall, the entire tone of the report is something that I really appreciated. You can really see the creativity of the staff and just how much everybody's really leveraging all the resources that they have to come up with really great solutions. And I think this is a good example, one of maybe you have a few fewer programs, but your reach is bigger. So I just want to commend the whole team on that, like everything that's been done in here. I just think, wow, what a creative solution, or wow, that's a great idea. Or I wouldn't have thought to do things that way. I just think it's really great. Thank you.
That's an important one to know about the staff too. We've had a lot more on this year. We've tried to cultivate connectedness along more multi-age events. But for recording purposes, we can only track an event with a single audience. So a lot of the ones that are multi-age, that are not specifically like family oriented, get categorized as adults, even though a lot of their participants may be teens.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Amy, and you're also working on, observation. For service and curating.
Yeah.
I mentioned that in terms of the quality of each, participants, experience of the program. That's something that we're trying to look at too, not just like sheer numbers of that head count.
So actually, that was gonna be one of my questions. Can you talk a little bit more about that tool?
Yeah, so observation deck is something that we've been developing as part of an IMLS grant project led by the University of Wisconsin, Madison Public Library, the Butler there. So it started out as a tool, trying to build a tool from scratch. They're working with an app developer. We get to help test it all, to figure out how are ways that we can be in hands-on learning environments and programs and try and capture observations that point towards we're reaching the outcomes we're trying to accomplish. So ours, Katie Holcomb, the learning experiences manager, in her previous role overseeing experiential learning specifically and continuing, has been working with the team and the grant team to develop what is the framework, like what are our goals for all of our hands-on learning spaces? What are behaviors that indicate we're achieving our goals? Things like how people are connecting to the staff, how they're connecting to one another, when they're trying something new, when they're applying a skill in a new context. So what are a lot of the indicators and how we can kind of track that? So that's been, was in development all last year. Integrating it is now part of the daily shift reports for all of our experiential learning spaces. And Amy Holcomb has started connecting with other public services teams one at a time to build out what does it look like to develop a similar tool for starting with programs in those areas and looking at other related services as well.
So when you're taking the data, then and you have somebody, and this is what, I'm just trying to get a picture of what it looks like. So there was somebody who's purposefully like kind of marking the look forms
Yes.
while you're, so you have people who are staff members who are interacting with.
So it's actually they're
public
doing double
and then-
duty. So it's not, it is not a like rigorous scientific level data collection in that like we're capturing every single interaction in that specific program or visit to a space. It's more asking staff members who've already been trained in how to facilitate in ways that will promote these behaviors to take down more observational notes about the sorts of behaviors they were seeing. So that overall, again, it's not descriptive of everything, but we can start to see trends of like, all right, these are the sorts of activities that people are really gravitating toward that encourages them to connect with one another. So that we can kind of refine, all right, how can we better meet some of our goals in some of the areas that aren't as intuitive for folks just coming into this space.
You can add photos, videos.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting because, you know, so much, I think oftentimes a lot of the programs that we have, we know that we're making the impact, but it's so qualitative. So be able to have more quantitative data on that. Yeah, you know, I think it's a really great way for us to be able to reflect on how we're doing it, especially if that incorporates into the strategic plan. So it's really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Five staff for over 20 years. If you want to do a shout out to that.
I just wanted to know if you'll see later in the staffing report that our staff as a whole has over 1,400 years of experience, and it's right here. Just these 5 people. Yeah.
50% right there.
Yeah. It continues to be really rewarding to interview our staff and just hear what they remember about things that have changed over time, but also how they feel their work impacts the community and each other.
Do you feel that these kinds of, highlights, is that impacting staff members on the connectedness? Do you feel that there's an impact there?
Yeah, I think there's some, we post these on our intranet, and we send out a notification that they've been posted and we shout out the specific people for that month. And I have heard people comment, oh, I didn't know you started, 2 years before I did, or, your mom introduced you to this job, so did mine, or, things like that. So yeah, I do think it's giving people, new details about each other that allows them to then do a connection.
We have 70 in September, so. And some of our efforts to recognize them or do it again.
Good questions or comments? All right, if not, we'll move on to annual department reports from Public Services, Community Engagement, Organizational Development, pages 38 through 51. Richard? Highlighters.
So this is the continuation of the reports that we saw last month. They're not really strictly department reports, but obviously they're kind of big areas of our library that we do. I think they're all terrific this month, and if you have a question, you can send what's written, but they speak for themselves. We'll try to sort of find that these are kind of usually later in the year. Starting next year, we're going to be scheduled to be prior to the June.
I just wanted to know about the very meeting where we're providing opportunity for court order community service for teens. I was wondering if that was a newer thing, and happy that it's happening, and that can be an opportunity for young people to do their service that way.
We've been doing that
For a long time.
yeah, as far as I can remember. We and Amy are here.
It's
I have questions to see
You guys want to highlight?
It's always hard to, narrow
Yeah.
your of like so many service areas into one. So hope you know that anytime you have questions about stuff here or stuff you see elsewhere, it's just ask, what happy to share.
I have one other quick question. I'm still learning about all of the ways people can volunteer. It was really wonderful to read about it, and I'm just wondering, is there a snapshot of where there are gaps, or do you feel like you have like a robust volunteer kind of scene, or are there still places where you wish there was more of X, Y, or Z activity?
It's a great question. I feel like that, and Nancy's not here tonight,
Yeah.
in order to. She works a lot of meetings and weekends, so I was like trying to, but not that she did. The
Yeah, I saw her.
okay. She's heading home to rest. So I'll try to speak on this. It's really like a tale of two periods, before COVID.
Yeah.
Before COVID, there were a number of opportunities, very robust kind of like operation, and then COVID really obviously did a number on us, in terms of like not just the public service, but the volunteer engagement opportunities. So we're on our volunteer programs and skills to try to rebuild that and kind of get some momentum. And so I don't know if we're quite like up to full strength and kind of full revving it all the way up. To your point, like there might be some gaps or like opportunities that we still have to discover,
Yeah.
And keep in mind also, like, as we've come back from COVID, and as we've tried to get used to serving the public in our new building, we're still like in the toddler years, you know, in terms of like kind of post renovation. New service models, so hopefully, as we go along, we'll see more and more opportunities. And things will come to light, you know, and then I think what we've done so far has been really impressive and proud of the efforts that done, and a lot of our team has been. Cheers. We're also, I think I mentioned this in some investment, we're working with the village and others to try to put on a volunteer care community.
Yeah,
So that'll be good too, just like, not just for the attract volunteers for us, but
Right.
for the entire community and other agencies and communities. We're, I think that the idea, don't hold me to this, but the last I heard was, the idea might be to have a volunteer organizations of volunteers kind of scattered throughout the library, so it's not a full library experience as opposed to like kind of going to that.
right.
Go around the scene of a Sunday.
Right.
Yeah,
So-
hopefully it'll be a nice one.
Yeah, I thought the workforce data was interesting.
Yeah.
Looking at the Skokie population with the turnover rate. So it looks like 200 people left in the last 5 years.
Mhm.
There was no comparative. How is that good, bad? What's your take on that for turnover relative to other libraries?
Yeah, that's a great question, and Laura, hop in if you have an opinion. My thoughts on our turnover rate is that it's actually quite normal and average and has stayed quite steady. So yes, that's a lot, but I feel like, that's pretty universal for the last 5 years. There's been a fairly significant amount of retirements and just the people making decisions about where they want to work. So, but I believe our turnover rate is actually quite average.
And we did look back even pre-pandemic and it hasn't varied that much, so it's not like now it's vastly different than it was, 15 years ago, so.
Yeah,
Pretty steady.
just encouraging.
Kind of a lot of it is the nature and many of the positions that we have here at the entry level part-time.
Mhm.
A lot of jobs that, you know, people start off with when they're in high school, college, and then go to and it's not really necessarily something that they're planning to do forever, you know, it's just kind of while they're in school or so.
Yeah, we're really lucky to be a lot of people's first jobs.
So great.
Mhm. Mhm.
All right, we don't need, do we need to approve? those?
No, that's just, these are annual reports and we're done now with the annual reports. Next year, next month, we'll have a report, other. Grouping reports, you know, I was telling Gene, I apologize, I didn't put it in writing here, but. A bunch of us sat down recently and just drew up a chart of all the various reports that are provided to the board. Not only for the board's benefit, but for all of the staff benefit as well. The monthlies, the annuals, the strategic updates, so we have a calendar now where we have hopefully a nice distribution of a spread throughout the year, so it's not all piling up on staff, so it's not burdensome for staff to do these reports, but also in terms of the reader, it's not that burdensome for you to read 20 different reports.
In doing that review, did you find that there were potentially any redundancies where there's an opportunity to eliminate the report? Or, I mean, not saying because I don't want to read it, I'm just asking for like the benefit of everybody.
No,
As
we're
somebody
not-
who does-
she does not want-
I've been on the other side,
No, I
like,
know.
we're doing a lot of reports and sometimes you're like, oh, this is so similar to this, is there an opportunity like combine? So I'm just curious if you guys did that.
We definitely talked about that, and trust me, we encourage the folks who are writing reports. Keep it streamlined, you know, like, we're not looking for thesis, you know, like 100-page documents where it's like one pagers are fine, or 2 pages. A lot of these are charts and graphs too, so there's not hopefully too much.
No, it's definitely, I'm just looking out for everybody, you know?
Yeah, no, yeah.
Are there redundancies, are there ways to simplify?
And we'll try this out and we'll involved, you know, and if the board, if you all start feeling like, you know, you don't need to see this type of, a certain type of information at a certain frequency, please let me know. Give us honest feedback, because we'll adjust.
Well, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for all of these annual reports. Just the caliber of it in and of itself is such high quality. And we, I don't speak for myself, but I read every single word of it. So even though I might not comment on every single thing, please know that it's very much, you know, so informative, it's well written. You really get a true understanding of what happened, and I know that's really hard to go, just like you were saying about how, you know, to put it all in a one page or 2 pages is hard sometimes to get out really succinctly. But it really does give a great overview of all the things that are happening in the library, and all the accomplishments that have been done in the course of the year. So it really is encouraging to see that these are so many great ways that we are continuing to move forward and push beyond the world for our organization.
Yeah, and I'm super proud of the team and those who are releasing these reports. I think these have been the best reports. Kind of succinct in some ways, but highlighting the things that are worth highlighting, not creating excess. And when we report a lot of this kind of activity in our quarterly strategic updates and the dashboards, and so we try to provide information that's not just.
I mean, this is really, these are like exemplar, so I don't know if you guys are like, you know, submitting this to other, you know, PD or anything that you can go and showcase this, but I really do think that these are exemplar.
We say thank you. Good job, everyone. I didn't know we were gonna get far. Put that on my bingo card.
All right, page 52, discussion of anticipated capital projects. Richard has late breaking news.
Don't get too excited.
Yeah.
It's not good news.
Yeah.
Well, so as I mentioned in my memo here, and again, this is just for information. There's not asking me to do any problem, but try to give you, as a reminder, we try to give you this snapshot twice a year at least, right? Once during the tax levy discussion, once operating budget discussion. So this is just to give you a sense of what we're seeing in terms of, like, obviously things that are currently in place or being planned for this fiscal year, current fiscal year, and also the things that we anticipate happening in the next year or something. So if there are any questions about what you see on page 53, please try to answer those. But we've also, so during the chiller project, we had our engineering firm that was designing the chiller project for us. We commissioned them to do a condition assessment for the HVAC system. And so they did like a deeper dive than what we normally had with our capital asset studies and our building over the past 7 years. And I just got the report yesterday morning. So it was after I wrote this memo, and they did highlight a couple of concerns that might lead to significant costs for big projects. So one is our second floor air handler system is there's some we've gotten more out of it than we should have. Let's say that, you know, like in terms of the service life, we're way past the normal service life with the air handler and the components, and there are certain parts of it that we should be thinking about the next 2 years replacing or refurbishing. So and these are big systems, right? So that's potentially, I hesitate to even throw out the number because Laura and I just had a call with the person who wrote this report, and he really emphasized these are just, everything's working right now, there's nothing broken. So it's not like an immediate failure or anything, but these are just like, hey, this should be on your radar. Or a potential risk if you don't address it, right? So if a piece is like corroding and we don't do anything about it, then years down the line, there might be a failure and it might cost for repairs, it might be inconvenience to services, etc. So it might just be a hassle, right? So we want to get ahead of it, try to address things that may fail over the next over a few years. So one is air handler that could be upwards in the ballpark range of for that second for an air handler system. If we pick it in pieces and we do like refurbishment of components, then that could be maybe 2/3 of the cost. But we need to do some more investigating with the firm to do like a study basically to figure out what really is a picture, what are our options, what's viable, what's not, and then kind of come up with the best course of action. And then once we do that, I feel like we would have a better idea of the potential cost. And then still then we would need to bid out the work and then see if the bids come back and that might even change the cost projections. So just wanted to get that on your radar. There's also a matter of, we have many hot water pumps in the building and a couple of them are starting to show signs of aging, right? So this happens when there are seals that are kind of failing and then there might be overtime with a leak here and there and erosion. Again, it's all working. There's nothing that's filled, but we want to get ahead of it and address it if we know. Which now we sorry to analyze it. So that's another potential cost as well. So that's lower. That's like 120,000. So over the next 2 years, there might be a potential of say 1.2 $3 million added cost for capital improvement projects. I really want to emphasize that these are just ballpark figures. I don't even know the timeline. I don't know the true cost. I don't know like the best solutions. So this is like this given to me. There's a lot that has to happen between now and when we actually do the work. Just like the chiller, we studied it for so long. And it was months and months went by to design the system before we even bid it out and install it. So similar to that. That's what I think will happen here. But, good news is, we do have a healthy reserve fund, as I mentioned. We can talk about that later for the tax settings portion, but that's the kind of thing that we plan for, right? It's accelerated or expected capital improvement projects. That's why I feel that we always have to keep that reserve fund very healthy. Not assume that it'll stay at a fixed rate over years because it won't. The fact is that we'll have capital improvement needs every year, right? Just because we did our renovation doesn't mean that it needs some mechanical electrical being used and also potentially replacement. So anyway, just wanted to mention that to add to the capital improvements projections picture. So if you have any questions, I'm gonna set us.
I do. Is it possible then, and I know this is we just got the
Yeah.
report, but just for planning purposes to do something like that, phases over the course of several years and.
My understanding is that may be a possibility, but until they do a real in-depth study and dig a little deeper, they might know what the best course of action is. I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but this building is kind of like Frankenstein building, and it was added onto twice. And so that means the mechanical and the HVAC systems are all over, right? It's not like just one room that has everything. Right? And the second floor, especially the mechanical unit, it wasn't designed in a way where it would be easy to just remove and then bring something new in, right? That they would have to, it's like custom built inside the space that we have. There's not a lot of other space. So the spacing might be the best way to do that work, to keep the library open and not just shut down. But again, I don't know if that's like a viable and recommended solution, because we have, I imagine refurbishing that may also kind of lead to, certain, there might be, a service life impact on that, and quality that we don't know, so we have to kind of learn more from our engineers.
I just wanted to add that the two air handlers on this floor were put in 1973. And we have replaced components of them along the way, so not everything in it is from 1973, but that, as Richard said, that far exceeds the lifespan that you would expect to get from it. So we have brought it along and it is still functioning and it's getting older.
And the other thing that we learned is that this is not in any way abnormal, right? For a public building with this much use, this large, with this many people, open 7 days a week. He said, like, none of this is like shocking when you walk into any public building, municipal or library or municipal building. And it'll probably look similar, but it's, now that we have this information, we can't not see it and unsee it, right? So we have to like move forward and address it in a responsible manner. So that's what that doing.
One of the things that jumped out to me was, first line under the little yellow one that says replace older windows on the main level. This building has a lot of windows, so I'm just curious, like, when we did some of these renovations or any other windows replaced, like what is our windows strategy? You know, for maintaining an update, like what have we done, like how often?
I can speak to that, yes. So the second floor windows, all these are new.
Okay.
So they were completely replaced and put in during renovation. One of this floor.
Okay, what's the typical lifeline for a window?
Oh, I don't have that in front of me.
Okay.
But, like this addition went up in early 1970s.
Okay.
They were the original.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's not like we're gonna be changing them every 5 years
Okay.
or something. Unless when somehow.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen, right? So the first floor is a different story. When we did the renovation planning, we specifically asked SMC, as they were assessing everything in the scope of the project was being designed. Do we need to replace the first floor windows? And what they determined was, and their advice was, there's enough light in these windows and there's no pressing need to replace them. So that's something you can come back later in several years and take care of. So that's what we decided to do.
Okay.
So
when you say it says replace older windows, so is this all of the windows? Is it?
it's
a
like the large
percentage of it?
panel windows on the perimeter of the building and also in the courtyards.
Okay. And then when we just did the third floor renovation, were any windows updated during that
No,
process?
no,
too?
but that's not, this is a younger floor, right? So
Yes.
it's like 20 years old,
Okay,
4 years old now, so there's no, that's not on our immediate
Okay.
projection.
I was just curious, when I saw, it, I was like, well, geez, like how many, I didn't know if it was, we're gonna do a chunk of windows a year and then another year, we have more windows, I just wanted to figure out what.
Yeah.
Okay,
I've seen enough windows replaced now and put in over the years that it used to be that I was kind of scared of or nervous about the idea of like replacing windows. And I'm not anymore because it's just like, I've seen these folks in action. They just come and they like, they're so good at just like cleanly removing and then like installing. And it's like, there's no mess, like.
That's how you get it.
Exactly, that's why you see that number there.
Yeah.
So, I think I don't feel intimidated by the project, I should say. I think it's just something we need to do.
Okay.
We'll time. And hopefully there'll be limited disruption of services.
Other questions or comments? Right, now then let's move on to discussion of tax levy, pages 54 through 59. Let me preface by saying, tonight we're talking about it, we're not voting on it. We would vote next month on what we actually want the tax levy change or no change to be. So tonight's a talk about, get a sense of where we stand, what questions we have. Richard will be back next month with additional information next month. This is the one, this is why we have to run for election. This is the item. We passed the tax levy, so. So one of our major responsibilities. That being said, Richard, you want to?
Yeah, I'm sure. So I know that this memo every year, there's just tons of information that you. I try to make it as easy to understand as possible, just kind of. My goal was to walk you through step by step of what I'm thinking of when I'm looking at our financial picture. So that's why you see a lot of information, but I try to include a summary section here that kind of, if you read the whole thing and you're like, so what does this all mean? Like, go back to the summary, you know, like almost do a loop, and that hopefully will remind you of like the main points that I'm trying to make here. And I'll just mention those really quick, and if you have any questions about specific parts of this memo, then I'm happy to dig further into that, but so just a reminder, the tax levy is has remained flat with no increases for the past 6 years. So what that essentially means is that the total dollar amount that we are levying has remained the same, right? So it might have been slight variations for the debt service portion of the levy versus the operating portion of the levy, but added up, the total dollar amount has remained the same for that long. Right? So the last increase that happened was in 2017. That was a 1.5% increase from the previous total. Tax collections have been steady. So when we do levy, we have seen that our revenue stream from the county, when they collect taxes and they distribute it to us, have been steady. Right? So that's a great thing to have. Like property tax collection revenue is rock solid. Right? So it's not like kind of prone to like ups and downs and with like sales tax or some other types of revenue streams like grants and that type of thing. And so we have healthy balances for our general operating fund and our reserve fund. So those are the two main funds that we're looking at. And I break it down and we're looking at what's the health of our general operating fund of the GOF. Especially at the lowest the balance point in the balance is the lowest in February of any given calendar year, right? So why that is because it's right before our spring collections. So we're spending down what we received in the fall, and we're at the lowest balance. And then hopefully, like in March, we get an influx of infusion of received from property tax collections. And so at the lowest point, our goal has been to try to get to have a balance that if we didn't receive another dollar from forest collections or it was delayed, we would still have enough to carry us through for like maybe 4 months. Right? That's our mentality. We never want to get it down to like we're just praying for that tax money to come in because we won't be able to pay staff or buy books or whatever, right? But we never want to set it up that way. So we have 4 months worth of 40% of our normal operating expenditures in the bank, essentially, at our that's the goal. And with the reserve fund, that's also at a healthy balance right now. Even with, I mean, I think that I just want to remind the board, even though we've done renovation for the entire building at this point, I will soon be completed. Our reserve fund is still at the end of all that be at the threshold where that's been mandated by the board of the finance policy, right? So around 5 billion or 5 months worth of operating is what we strive to have in the reserve fund, and we will have that. We'll be closer to like 5.6 after all the second of the petty. So GOF and the reserve fund are currently in a good place. Now, if you take those, initial projections that we gave you. That it's not, I don't really want to say proposed budget, but it's like ballpark budget projections for the purposes of the levy discussion. If you take that and you look at, the expected increases for salaries, for insurance, for other areas, pension and publicity. For maintenance of buildings and grounds. And you take that and couple that with revenue that remains flat. In other words, the total tax levy that remains the same, then we will have a shortfall. And the expected budget expenditures will be more, a lot more than the revenue that we expect to receive, right? So can I guarantee that that will happen? No, because there can be surprises in terms of what we collect. There can be surprises in what we spend, right? Every year we strive to not exceed our budget, obviously, so and we've been successful, so but even if we don't spend as much as we've budgeted for, that budget shortfall is pretty significant. Right? So it would, I have a hard time believing that we will spend less to a point where we won't have that budget shortfall. Or that deficit. So increasing the tax levy this year would obviously add additional revenue. It would allow us to decrease that projected shortfall. And then if we have an excess of revenue over expenditures next at the end of fiscal year 2026, which is the year that we're talking about this levy applying to, then we will have a greater chance of either keeping our GOF balances healthy and strong, or putting money into our reserve fund so that we can kind of keep that level strong. So as I mentioned in the capital projects, we're talking about 700,000 potentially for next year. If you add another 1.3 for these other pressing concerns, that's 2 million right there. So then now we're talking about our reserve fund going down from 5.6 to, let's say, 3.6, and that's not what the board has asked for in the finance policy. Now the board can adjust the finance policy and adjust that number. We're not by law like mandated, obviously, to have that healthy of a reserve fund, but that would be something that the board needs to tell me so that I can execute it. But as of right now, the finance policy says keep it at 5 million. So, or 5 months worth. So that's kind of in a nutshell how we're processing the information. You can see in the rest of the memo, I include some context from the history. I have some other numbers here and my notes of the tax levy increased history going back to 2002. If you're interested in hearing more about that. I also provide a little bit of kind of an idea of like what a 1% increase would yield, or what a 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And what the average increase per household in Skokie would look like if you approved an increase in those amounts. And then I also just make the point, I think this is worth noting, and I try to make this every year, is that because of the nature of, and I think we all understand how compounding works, because of the nature of these, how this works, if every year that the board doesn't increase the levy by percentage points, I see that as lost revenue essentially, because like I think of 10 years from now, for the people who are in charge of running the library, and also the board members who are all to think about the financial fiscal health of the library. If there's no action, then I have a genuine concern about what the financial picture might look like for those folks, like the future us, right? So that's something to consider as well. It's not to the degree where I'm pushing and really kind of trying to make a case for a real big increase this year. But I just want to impress upon the board the reality of that, right? So that, if there is, a decision to do a 0% again, and it continues, it could impact the services and the savings for the future administrators and future board members. And then impact. So it's a lot for you all to juggle, like, as Jean mentioned, this is the board's decision ultimately, and I'm here to support, what the board wants to do and execute it and find a way, which we've always done. I think we've done a really good job for many years now, and we'll continue to do so, but hopefully this information helps to kind of put it all out there so you can make the best decision that you can. Any questions?
Like the question, maybe someone who's been on the board in 2017, who experienced the increase in spot visits of like, was there any reaction from the community around that when it was 1.5%? Is that felt, is it noticed, is it discussed, or is that something that happened and carried out? You're allowed to answer that.
My sense is we as a board have never gotten directly pushed back against it. What we've seen is actually from the village and Evanston Library, so the village puts out, we haven't raised taxes in 30 years, and here's how much of a percent of your dollar goes, and the library takes up significantly more of the percent, and so and that's in part because like the park district can charge fees.
Right.
Activities, you have to pay them, whereas we don't. So anytime we do increase, they'll tell the public that we've increased it. And Evanston talks about how they charge their citizens less for their library services. Skokie charges its citizens. So now they're not as good, but they don't say. So that's where I hear it coming back. But as far as when we've passed it, nobody's ever come to a meeting. So how dare we? Right. Last election, we ran on the platform. We've been like 4 years without raising taxes, so we really ran on a fiscal responsibility platform. So there was nothing we couldn't be challenged.
I would just add that my experience has been similar. I can't remember a time when to be set up that like levels. I just never have heard of it. So I did a little research on you mentioned the park district. It's the park district, just a reminder, the park district, the library, the local school districts, and there are many in Skokie, you know, so depending on where you live, your local district, right? The village, obviously, it's one part of the dollar bill, right? You see this on the village website sometimes, right? And the park district, their past 2 levies have been a 4.9. So, and I look back at our levy history, our library levy history. It's so interesting. Before the flat increases, there were, if you take like the 2009 to 2018, 2017, that's about 9 years or so, the average increase was about 1.5% over those years. Prior to that, in the 7 years prior to that, 2002 to 2008, the average increase was a 6.32. So there were years when the library had a 7%, 9%, 7%, 6%, 5%, and then the recession happened, right? And so I think the board, I looked at some of the numbers from back then and tried to understand what was happening there, because I was working at the library, but I was in the adult service library, and I wasn't in movies like this. Right. So there was discussion about, given the economic conditions, like, we're going to like reduce it to 3%, 2%, and then that kind of just stopped for many years, right? And then more recently, I think or, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we started the discussions of taking on the renovation project in around 2017, 18, I think there was a thought from the board, and I agree, if we're going to take on this project and take on debt, let's at least try to navigate this for the next level. And that, I think that was smart, and we've managed to do that for the past 6 years, right? But now that project is over, and we have a whole new set of capital, so kind of projecting, not just, next year, but like, say, the next 5 years, right, or 10 years. I think that this is the time to like kind of reset if possible.
I got a question, just so make sure, page 59, where you're projecting the budget for the proposed budget for 25-26. So I understand you're saying salaries increase, which raises the subtotal, but in fact, the full total between last year and this year is 14,733,000. And you're projecting that next year, the total would be 14,763,000. So it's really only a change of $30,000 between this year's budget and next year's budget.
Well, I would look at the subtotal 13.4 current and 14 proposed, as opposed to the total number at the bottom, because that takes into account the utilization of reserves, which is not really dealing with new incremental money from the levy, it's more money that we already have to go through. So the total budget, you're right, but in terms of the potential 15, 25, 26 operating budget, it is most of the commodity.
And then we've been moving million unspent from the budget into reserve every year. So this doesn't account for how much money we're going to have left in the budget at the end.
This is not our projection of that.
Right.
Yeah.
So, for example, like today's 55% through the year, we're already 2% ahead. Each time $13 million budget would be 200,000. So odds are we're going to have on track for another million this year. Have on spent.
So that's the reality as well. And some of that is part of that is not spending what we're budgeted for completely to the max, right?
Yeah, you guys have done a great job.
But part of that excess of revenue over expenditures is unexpected revenue, right, that came in higher than what we budgeted. So this past year, you remember that the corporate replacement tax was budgeted at a certain amount, and we received about 450,000 above that, right? So that had nothing to do with how much we were spending. That had everything to do with. So there's kind of like two things happening, right? But they equal the person. If I had to guess, the corporate replacement tax calculation or projection is not out yet. Allison and I are like, I think you're probably doing the same thing I am, like refreshing the page because it's like any day now, the revenue should be telling us what that is, and we should have a very solid number of what we expect to receive this fiscal year. But if I had to guess, I mean, in 25, 26, I think that the excess of revenue over expenditures will probably be closer to maybe a few $100,000, maybe 500,000, potentially, not like $1 million, because the recent expenses that are the revenue increases that we've had for corporate replacement taxes, that's not going to last forever. It might actually end this year, so we'll see. And also our budget lines have been have tightened up a lot. You know, so there's not a lot of like kind of looseness here, like there's not a lot of excess. So I think this year, next year, following years, depending on what the budgets that the board approves, we'll get tighter and tighter, and you'll see that what's getting closer to that like maxing out on various lines. Like the salary line needs to have a bit of cushion there, just to account for like kind of surprises or whatever, right? That's really down to, if we were fully staffed, like, we would be spending that. So like, what happens is like someone might resign or retire, and it might take us like, say, 2 months to fill that position. Those 2 months kind of start adding up, and for like a couple of those, that creates a little cushion. And then that kind of is the excess, but it's not something I would bet on. This is what I'm saying. I can't count on it. Is it, you know,
Was budget. 25, there were some numbers when I looked back at, you know, even what we budgeted for this year, is some big differences, right? So if we look at, for example, printing and publicity, FY 23, we budgeted 111,000. Non-audited was 113,000, right? And then budgeted for this year is 128, but then our proposed is 166.4. Right, so like, that's a lot of money.
that's the biggest jump. Yeah, that line, it's an astute observation that one of the lines that there is in terms of percentile increases, that's a big leap. At the end of the day, though, it's $34,000, right? For $38,000, and I mean, printing costs are going up. Newsletter is an expensive piece of material that is very effective for us, but also continues to rise in cost. We're doing a lot, so there's a lot more to promote, and also that ballpark number includes kind of new initiatives, right? So like if we want to do something new in terms of like doing better with like translations, interpretations, kind of getting the promotional materials out to people who may not speak English. That's kind of the idea there, is to put aside some money to really do that well. We're thinking about our reading programs like Royal Reader, like do we need to refresh that? You know, that might involve more materials, like you know, so a lot of these special projects like end up costing us that. When it comes down to actually budgeting, creating the budget in February or January, February next year, like it could be very well that number is like slightly less than that, you know. So this is like kind of showing you what might be possible.
I guess, you know, because I did see some others that I see some big differences, you know, maintenance, buildings and grounds, and you know, like the 30,000 is like, you know, in multiple areas does add up.
It does.
Right? And I just wanted to be cognizant of that. And, you know, I understand that those are the things that we have in the process we might be anticipating of doing in the upcoming years. But then I think that that's important for us if we say, you know, we want to be doing more printing and publicity and things like that, and we're going to put toward these new initiatives. Then we should probably be doing away with some of the other things that we budgeted for within that category, the things that maybe we don't need anymore, right? Or we're not getting that, like, you know, return on investment for those types of, whether it's programming, whether it's the flyers that we're printing out, you know, for certain, you know, events and things like that. So just kind of being cognizant of that, you know, I just think that it's something for us to keep in mind if we're going to be then asking the public to now be paying for more on their taxes, right? And property taxes have gone up significantly for residential. You know, so keeping those things in mind, and then knowing that, you know, we have done some significant renovations. So we have the ability to do that without asking, and now we're going to be asking people to can't be doing it when we're in, when some of these numbers to me seem very inflated, right, for like a proposed budget. So, you know, just something to keep in mind as we come to our decisions, you know, next month, that, you know, that's a big ask for our taxpayers right now, with property taxes going up. So,
I hear what you're saying, yeah, we, you know, the budget process, and this isn't the full budget process.
Right.
You know, so
I know.
I agree with you.
I know, and I understand that, but I just think, you know, that's something for us to keep in mind too, of, you know, we do have this set kind of. You know, how are we utilizing it, and do we need to back off from some things so that we don't have to go against taxpayers
Yeah.
to then pay for that? You know, I think there are things like salaries that you do need a bigger cushion for. Insurance, we all know insurance rates are going up, so you need a bigger cushion for that. But there are some things that I think are a little bit more within our control that we can be, you know, seeing where we could be shifting monies instead of going out to the public and asking our taxpayers to, you know, add to their taxes, right?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and like the fine tuning the budget and really scrutinizing it at that level is part of the process for the budget.
Right.
I totally agree with you. The salaries line and the insurance line, like you mentioned, are the big heavy ones
Right.
here, you know, like. Like everything else could go up like, 5% or whatever, and it's still in to like the actual increases, the salary things will. Insurance line, and so, yeah, those are the big ones, but across the board, yeah, this would.
Say like a big component for me will be understanding, that definitely for sure, like the corporate sector, because I totally, like, I hear what you're saying. I mean, we control expenses as much as we can, but if we're also not bringing in the amount of revenue, it's going to, there's going to be a breaking point at some point, right? So,
Yes.
and you said that we will have that information before we have to vote on the tax levy next.
If it follows the schedule that it has been for years now, like mid-August is kind of like that. So any day now is what we're expecting. right?
Because obviously, when we're talking about potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? So when you're talking about a potential, like when we have the shortfall, and mind you, the shortfall is assuming like we spend everything, right? And so kind of going back to what you were talking about, Jean. So I feel like there's a lot of moving parts here, right? Like based on what Michelle was talking about, like maybe if we aren't spending that much and we have an excess, of course, but then if we're also not bringing in the amount of revenue. So to me, it's almost going to be a little bit of a balancing act, and this is kind of where my head is. I do agree that with costs going up, inflation, all of these things, I don't think it's sustainable to continue doing a 0% year over year. I also don't think it's responsible to suddenly be asking taxpayers to pay large amounts, right? So to me, it's kind of finding that balance in between of what's fiscally responsible, where we are providing ourselves with enough funding to make sure that not only for now, but for the future, that the library is getting the funding that it needs, but also not putting an undue, like large responsibility on taxpayers. So, at least for right now, I feel like I need more information on where the revenues are going to come. I'm a little hesitant to still kind of stay at 0%, just seeing, especially in these capital projects that you are talking about. I don't want to be in a situation where also if we don't do a smaller levy like year over year or something, all of a sudden we have a really big shortfall, then you will have to explain to the public, oh, we're going to have to, I mean, I would much rather have a small little chunk, see how that goes, adjust the budget, rather than have to suddenly say, we have 9%. I mean, I would rather not do that. So it's almost kind of like learn as we go, make adjustments. That's kind of where my head is, but to me, a big component is understanding what that corporate tax thing, and then taking in mind what Michelle said, just about looking at maybe if we've got a little bit of extra surplus or cushion here, just kind of being responsible on both sides.
We always try to do that, and we've managed to deliver the best quality services over the past 7 years with the 0% increase, so I think we've proven, like, in terms of budget and spending, that we very, very responsible in that regard. I'll just say to your point about the, like, not having all the information, right? Like,
Right.
I think I wrote you, like, I
Yeah.
feel like I'm in the same boat, there's so many variables. But let's play this out, you know, like in my mind. Let's say we have the budget deficit of 800,000, right, if we spend everything.
That's like the worst case.
Right.
Yeah.
And then let's say we have a million of excess revenue over expenditures, right? So then that budget deficit is covered, right? But then the excess of revenue over expenditures is not that high, right? And then you're in a position where we're accustomed to taking on capital projects whenever we need to and doing it well. Knowing that our reserve fund is there, right? But as we take on these reserve projects, let's say over the next 2 years, we take on $2 million worth of capital improvement projects. Suddenly our reserve fund is at 3.6. And then when we want to replenish that to the full 5, there's nothing, there's no access to
Yes.
contribute, right? So it's not just a matter of like, can we cover our deficit with our budget deficit with the excess to revenue over expenditures. It's can we do that and have enough to sustain our reserve fund at high levels so that we can be responsible for all the capital improvements that we know this building will need over the next 10, 20 years, right? And you'll see when we do our capital asset study and we get that report, we're like, we're pushing our BTC consultants to give it to us before the next meeting, but so I hope to have it for you there and factor it into the new information that I'll provide in September. But when part of a capital asset plan is to assume that there will be expenses and to assume that every year we should be putting in money to the reserve, right? So this current capital asset study that we did in 2017. It projected like 20 years worth of spending. And also it factored in 20 years worth of putting a certain amount into towards capital improvements in the budget, right? So the goal is to not end the 20-year period having exhausted the reserve fund, but completing the projects. The goal is to end the 20-year period having completed all the projects and have those reserve funds,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So that's what I'm kind of like. I don't want to overstate it. I'm not like worried, but that's what's in the back of my mind of not if we're not able to do that every year and putting money away. I just worry about like 5, 10, 15 years from now, looking back and saying, can we put them in a bind? So.
I'll just say one thing, because you were talking earlier about if the board wanted to, at least for me, I do not think we should be adjusting the finance policy to have a shorter, like a smaller amount. I think we have a very good policy. I think we should stay with that policy. That's just where I stand. So in summary, I stand on keeping the policy the same. I need a little bit more information, but I do think that you make a lot of valid points, and I think it's just about kind of finding the right balance of what's making sure that we're protecting the library, investing in the library, while also being cognizant of taxpayers. But for me, I just think the current status quo is not going to be continuously sustainable. So that's where I stand.
And hopefully next month I'll have a clear picture of what at least our current year corporate replacement tax revenue looks like, which will inform how, if we will have a
Yes.
excess
Yes.
to carry over next year. That'll be part of the picture, and then hopefully I'll have that capital asset study as well. So that we have a clear picture of what the capital improvement projects will be and when. Like we did in 2017. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to provide those two pieces of information. And if the board wants anything else, please let me know even tonight or in between the meetings. Feel free to reach out to me individually as well, obviously, if you like. I would like to like, just let me know, and we'll might not be something that we thought of, and we'll investigate, get that to the board.
I think to Michelle's point, maybe you're already gonna include this, but to understand what the capital assets cost, like
Yeah.
what could happen over a period of time versus what needs to be done like this in the next year.
Yeah,
with them.
we're really curious about that too. I can't wait to see that capital assets there.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I think, the initial. My initial feeling is that it's going to be encouraging to us because we took care of so many things during the renovation work. Right, so the past 4 years, we have reinvented so much of this building, right, and updated it. So we should be good on so many fronts. Hopefully, the requirement of us putting away certain figure, like every year for reserves for the next, to keep us at a healthy level over the next 2 years, is less than what it looked like in 2017, before we did it. Before we replaced the roof, before we added the children, before, you know, the renovation of 3 floors. So hopefully that'll show up in the capital assets, but I don't.
You know, input,
Yeah, I encourage you to let me know if you think of something, I know. Reread these memos and nice, good bedtime reading, you know.
I want stuff that keeps you up at night.
Oh, that's- You want to read this memo? I read a book. Yeah, I take that back.
Thank you for preparing all.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
I want to thank Allison too, Allison was instrumental in preparing this and Laura. This too, so it's a team effort.
Thank you. I know it's a lot to catch up.
all right, moving on to 61 to 63, approval of video surveillance policy. Who wants to tell us about that?
That's me.
Laura?
Yes, so another month, another policy, we're working our way through updating all of our policies, and this one hadn't been updated since 2016, so it was time. There are not a lot of huge changes in here, mainly we were just trying to make it as clear as possible, tweak it a little, to reflect our current practices, and to also make sure we're in alignment with all the applicable laws and, the Library Records Confidentiality Act, the Local Records Act, FOIA, things like that. We did run this past our legal counsel multiple times, actually, and because they work with so many different libraries in the area, they have actually developed some model policies, and this is one of them. So they were able to provide some language that they've proven works well in this same policy in other places. So it's kind of a best practices mix here. But yeah, they signed off on all the things that are in here. So we're feeling pretty good that this reflects what we need it to reflect in order to keep things safe. So I welcome any questions, and I recommend the board approve the video surveillance policy.
I have a question.
Sure.
Do we record audio as well on the video recording?
No, the cameras don't pick up audio at all, so.
And where are, what do we record now?
They are throughout the library, including some just outside the entrances and things. They are not found in places like restrooms where people would reasonably expect privacy. But they are, yeah, they're throughout all of our spaces.
And how do we identify that to our patron?
It's posted at both entrances, actually on the glass. It says that there's video recording in progress.
But we don't label the cameras. Highlight that within the space.
Oh, no, not physically within the spaces. It's also in our appropriate use policy, which is posted at each entrance and available on our website that we do have video surveillance.
But they're clearly,
Yeah.
they look like,
If
they're
you know
not
what
like
to
hidden.
look for, yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was like looking around.
Some of them are 360, some of them are like. Kind of shy, some of them. We've come a long way, honestly, and it's really helped us investigate, like you saw the appropriate libraries policy a few months ago, and it's helped us investigate. They're mostly used for investigations of like incidents and to clarify what happened in the situations.
Other questions or comments? Can I have a motion to approve the video surveillance policy as presented? Consensus vote, all in favor?
I,
Any opposed? That passes unanimously.
Thank you.
On to page 64, approval of the OCLC renewal.
That's also me. Um, OCLC, provides a number of services to us, mainly used in things like cataloging and our interlibrary loan. So it's a suite of tools that we depend on daily. These are used all the time by our tech services department, and we really heavily rely on them. In the past, the billing was monthly, so you didn't see a proposal each year for the renewal because it wasn't over the threshold of spending. It was just a monthly subscription essentially. It's moved to annual billing, so we're bringing it to you because it is now over the threshold for spending. But I highly recommend the board approve it so we can keep cataloging.
Can you see it's from, Illinois Heartland, it's because, the building is run through them, it's kind of the equivalent of Rails.
And that allows us to get the best pricing.
Questions or comments? Can I have a motion to approve the annual OCLC renewal of total cost of $49,828.80?
second,
Like to individual votes since it's money, Mary,
yes.
Amanda,
Yeah.
Michelle,
Yes.
Shabnam, Ella. Yes. Two, that's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very persuasive.
We say catalog.
Yeah.
You know.
Tell me to tell you my details. Yeah.
Also at the end of the meeting, so I'm wondering if that's.
Trustees.
I can make a comment. So, a few months ago, I had the board meeting, I mentioned that I was taking a graduate program and my team did a project on the Skokie Public Library. And, so a few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to meet with Richard and other members of the staff to actually go over the strategic plan that we put together. And it was a great brainstorming session. I felt like a lot of really good ideas came out of there. So I just wanted to express gratitude for allowing me to spend the afternoon with you. And it was really, really great and rewarding. So
Thank you, for putting all that work together, and I had a great time, actually, it was fun to just, so was it Friday that we did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a nice way to end the week too, just like an energetic.
I got to sit in the cool new space up on the third floor. I felt really cool up there, you know, just being with the team. So it was really neat, but it just feels like it was really cool to work with a group of people who really don't have any library experience or exposure and to come to the table with ideas that everyone here is working on, but then also some maybe new ideas or a different way to look at things.
Fresh eyes and.
Yes.
Thank you.
Comments? Adjourn.
I like I'm sorry, they're all today.
The same.
You all.